Centuries after a catastrophic event known as the Fall, a skilled cybersurgeon named Dr. Ido makes a startling discovery in the scrapyards beneath Iron City. Among piles of discarded machine parts, he finds the remains of a female cyborg. Though her body is destroyed, her brain is miraculously unharmed and still alive. Ido brings her to his workshop and carefully rebuilds her using a spare cybernetic body. When the cyborg regains consciousness, she struggles to understand her new form. She stands unsteadily, staring at her reflection with a mix of wonder and confusion. Slowly, she makes her way downstairs, quietly observing the man who saved her. Ido checks her systems for faults, but instead of complaints, she simply says she's hungry. As he helps her peel an orange, she asks whether she knows him or even herself. When she realizes her memories are gone, she breaks down. Ido comforts her, promising that her past may return in time. He later takes her outside, where she's stunned by the sight of a massive floating city above them, Salem. When she asks if she has a name, Ido calls her Alita. While showing her around Iron City, he explains that survivors from all over the world settled here after the fall, but no one is ever allowed to travel up to Salem. Alita becomes fascinated by a violent sport playing on a nearby screen called motorball, though Ido dismisses it as dangerous and pointless. Left alone briefly, Alita shares her meal with a stray dog and notices a wanted notice for a serial killer responsible for several murders. Suddenly, a towering police machine known as a Centurion arrives. Instead of backing away, Alita instinctively prepares to fight until a young man named Hugo pulls her out of harm's way. When the dog is threatened, Alita rushes back to save it. Impressed, Hugo realizes she's not fully human. Ido arrives and explains that Alita is new to the city. As Hugo leaves, Alita watches him longingly. Later that night, a woman is attacked in the shadows. Soon after, Alita wakes to find Ido returning home with blood on his arm. The following morning, she notices his injury while he treats a cyborg patient who claims his parts were stolen. The patient mentions the serial killer, prompting Ido to warn Alita to stay alert. Outside, Alita encounters Keean, a woman who studies her with unsettling interest. Keean later confronts Ido, pointing out that Alita is using the body of their deceased daughter. She accuses him of clinging to the past and proposes they work together to create elite motorball champions, claiming it's the only way to earn enough money to return to Salem, with help from a man named Vector. Ido refuses, convinced that no one ever truly goes back. Meanwhile, Alita finds Hugo playing motorball with his friends and is invited to join. At first, she struggles badly, crashing into obstacles and losing the ball. When a player named Tanji knocks her down and steals it, Alita refuses to give up. She adapts quickly, trips Tanji, takes control and scores, earning respect from the group. Hugo later gives her a ride home, and during the trip, he points out Zappen, a feared hunter-warrior whose massive sword immediately catches Alita's eye. The next day, Hugo shows Alita a hidden lookout where Salem fills the sky. He dreams of living there one day and suggests that since Alita came from the scrapyard, she might originally be from Salem herself. That night, Alita notices Ido sneaking out and secretly follows him. She sees him tracking a hooded woman and preparing to strike, but when Alita intervenes, the situation turns into an ambush. Two dangerous cyborgs, Gruishka and Romo, appear, recognizing Ido as a fellow hunter-warrior. The hooded woman reveals herself as Nisiana, another enemy. Outnumbered, Ido orders Alita to escape, but she refuses. Instead, she launches herself at Romo and kills him with a single devastating blow. Nisiana reveals her bladed cybernetic form and attacks fiercely, but Alita dodges and counters, slamming her opponent into a wall and crushing her skull. Meanwhile, Ido battles Gruishka but is completely overpowered. Gruishka pins him and mockingly forces him to watch as Alita fights. Undeterred, Alita faces Gruishka herself, dodging his crushing strikes and landing a powerful kick to his head, proving she is far more than anyone expected. As Alita leaps into the air to deliver a crushing overhead strike, a sudden vision flashes through her mind. She sees herself on a battlefield long ago, addressed only by the designation 99. Her kick comes down with devastating force, shattering Gruishka's arm and sending him retreating before he can be finished. In the aftermath, Ido collects the bounty placed on Nisiana, explaining that he uses the reward money to fund free medical repairs for the poor at his clinic. Alita presses him about the strange memories she experienced, forcing Ido to finally reveal the truth. The name Alita, along with the cyborg body she inhabits, once belonged to his real daughter. Confined to a wheelchair, Ido had built her a mechanical body so she could walk again. Tragically, she was later murdered when one of Ido's unstable patients broke into the clinic. That loss shattered his life and ultimately drove Keean away. Consumed by grief, Ido hunted down his daughter's killer and took revenge, but the act brought him no peace. That emptiness led him to register as a hunter-warrior. He also reveals something far more astonishing. Alita's heart is powered by an antimatter microreactor, a device so advanced it could energize Iron City for years. Since this technology hasn't existed since the fall, Ito realizes Alita must be more than 3 centuries old. Elsewhere, Vector pressures Chiron to produce elite motorball fighters for him. Their plans are interrupted when Gruishka crashes through the window, badly damaged and begging for repairs. Chiron initially refuses, but her stance changes the moment she hears Alita was responsible. While examining him the next day, Chiron notices Gruishka is now externally wired. Vector loses interest, until Gruishka suddenly speaks using the voice of Nova, a powerful figure from Zalem. Nova demands an explanation. Vector and Chiron admit that Alita defeated Gruishka, though they can't understand how. Nova deduces that Alita must possess knowledge of Panzerkunst, a legendary combat discipline. He orders Chiron to rebuild Gruishka, tasking him with capturing Alita dead. Nova then briefly takes control of Vector's body, promising Chiron passage to Zalem if she proves useful. Meanwhile, Ito and Alita discover that Gruishka has been removed from the bounty registry, meaning someone powerful is protecting him. Alita insists on becoming a hunter-warrior, believing it will help unlock her past. Ito refuses, fearing what she might become. Hurt and frustrated, Alita runs away. She soon joins Hugo at a motorball match, where he reveals that the final champion earns a ticket to Zalem. During the game, a heavily armed player named Kanuba draws Chiron's attention with his brutal weaponry. The match is abruptly interrupted when Tanji pulls Hugo away for urgent business. Later that night, Kanuba is ambushed outside the arena by masked riders. Though he fights back fiercely, more attackers arrive, electrocuting him before dragging him into a truck. As his body parts are stripped away, Vector arrives to praise the crew's efficiency. Hugo removes his mask, revealing that he and his friends orchestrated the attack. Vector pays them and instructs that the harvested parts be delivered to Chiron, then coldly executes Kanuba himself. The next day, Hugo and his friends take Alita beyond Iron City's limits, showing her the wasteland left behind by the Great War. They explain how all the Sky Cities fell after defying the United Republic of Mars, leaving Zalem as the sole survivor. Beneath the water, they reveal a submerged warship, hoping it might spark Alita's memory. The moment she sees it, recognition floods her mind. Alita dives in and makes her way through the wreckage, instinctively navigating the interior. Reaching the command chamber, she opens a sealed room containing a massive sphere. Without hesitation, she activates the controls, revealing an untouched cyborg body hidden within. Alita brings the body to Ito and begs him to install it, but he refuses. She argues that the ship responded only to her, proving she must have been a warrior. At last, Ito confesses the truth. Alita is a berserker, one of the most advanced combat cyborgs ever created. That knowledge is exactly why he's afraid to restore her. Devastated, Alita leaves in tears. Determined to reclaim her identity, Alita officially registers as a hunter-warrior. She later enters a bar frequented by bounty hunters with Hugo. Zappin notices her immediately and warns that she'll be competing with them for kills. Undeterred, Alita asks the room for help taking down Gruishka, but the hunters only laugh. Zappin mockingly offers to train her. Alita dismisses him, remarking that she won't learn from someone who wastes all his money on cosmetic upgrades. Insulted, Zappin threatens her, but Alita simply laughs in his face. Zappin lunges first, grabbing Alita, but she reacts instantly, slamming his head down onto a table. Enraged, Zappin swings his blade, forcing Alita to kick him backward. She then turns toward the gathered hunter-warriors, unimpressed. She declares that these so-called protectors of Iron City don't live up to their reputation. Alita challenges them outright, stating that if she defeats them, they'll have no choice but to help her mission. To provoke them, she kicks their drinks straight into their faces, igniting a full-blown brawl. As one hunter is about to strike her, Hugo intervenes, stunning the attacker with a taser. The chaos escalates until Ito storms in and threatens to stop providing free repairs at his clinic. That threat immediately brings the fight to a halt. Suddenly, Gruishka enters, fully rebuilt. Hugo quickly recognizes the grind cutters attached to him. No one moves against Gruishka, since there's no bounty on his head. When the stray dog Alita once protected begins barking at him, Gruishka coldly praises its bravery, then kills it without hesitation. Even Mektig, a hunter-warrior known for his love of dogs, refuses to fight, held back by fear. Heartbroken yet furious, Alita smears the dog's blood across her face like a warrior's mark and challenges Gruishka directly. He responds immediately, launching his grind cutters toward her. Alita dodges as the blades carve into the surroundings. Gruishka crashes through the floor, plunging underground, and taunts Alita to follow. She doesn't hesitate. Below the city, Gruishka explains that this underground space was once his home, and now he intends it to be her grave. Alita attacks, aiming to tear off his arm, but Gruishka is far stronger than before. Using his upgraded weapons, he relentlessly pressures her. Alita lands a powerful kick that knocks him back, but she suffers a deep cut to her leg. Forced on the defensive, she takes cover behind a pillar as Gruishka closes in. He reveals that the same individual who controls his fate also governs hers, Nova. When Alita rushes him head-on, Gruishka slices her cybernetic body apart. As she lies broken, another memory surfaces. Her mentor Gelda warning her that Nova is the true enemy. Drawing on that realization, Alita pushes herself up using her remaining arm and drives it straight through Gruishka's eye. Before he can counterattack, Ido and Hugo arrive. Fueled by rage, McTeague releases his pack of cyborg dogs, avenging the slain stray and forcing Gruishka to retreat. Ido gathers Alita's shattered body and carries her away. Chiron watches and cruelly mocks Ido, accusing him of trying to replace their lost daughter. With no alternatives left, Ido finally agrees to restore Alita using the Berserker body. The body reshapes itself according to Alita's subconscious image of who she truly is. When Alita awakens, she's overwhelmed with gratitude and excitement, immediately testing her new form. She demonstrates the ability to generate fire from her fingertips, which Ido identifies as controlled arc plasma, though even he doesn't understand how she's able to wield it. He reminds her that the body is only a vessel, and what truly matters is how she chooses to use it. Alita later walks with Hugo, proudly showing off her upgraded abilities. She notes heightened sensitivity throughout her body. Hugo asks her to close her eyes, leaning in to kiss her. Elsewhere, Nova, still operating through Vector, orders Gruishka to destroy Alita. He declares that she is the last and finest weapon of the Technarchy and demands her heart. Tired of Nova's control, Vector begins forming his own agenda. He invites Hugo for a drink, praising his ambition. Hugo explains that he's trying to earn enough credits to reach Zalem, but Vector steers the conversation toward Alita instead. The following day, Alita visits Hugo. He admits that meeting her has made him question his dream of going to Zalem. Alita refuses to let him abandon it and insists on helping him raise the money. She even offers her own heart, suggesting it could be replaced cheaply. Hugo refuses, unwilling to let her sacrifice herself for him. Instead, he proposes that Alita compete in motorball and become a champion. As Alita prepares for the competition, Ido outfits her with additional safety gear, unsure how to repair technology if something goes wrong. Unbeknownst to them, Vector has secretly hired hunter warriors to kill Alita during the match. At the same time, Hugo confronts Tanji, who is in the middle of stealing parts from a cyborg. Hugo admits he wants out of the operation. Tanji accuses him of changing because of Alita, provoking Hugo to slam him against a wall. Their argument escalates until Zappin intervenes. He mocks Hugo's criminal past and claims Alita would likely forgive him if he were dead. When Hugo points out that he has no bounty, Zappin murders Tanji's victim and frames the crime on Hugo, officially placing a price on his head. Tanji rushes to defend Hugo, but Zappin cuts him down instantly, slicing him in two without hesitation. In response, Hugo hurls incendiary rounds at Zappin, creating a fiery distraction before making his escape. Inside the motorball arena, Ido realizes something is wrong. The players on the track aren't ordinary competitors, but armed hunter warriors. As Alita enters the field, Vector watches with satisfaction, pleased that Hugo has unknowingly delivered her straight into the trap. Just before the match begins, Ido warns Alita that her opponents intend to kill her. Though clearly outnumbered, Alita remains confident, believing she can take them all. The moment the ball launches, Alita charges forward. Her enemies swarm her instantly, but she grips the ball tightly and turns it into a weapon, smashing one opponent backward and knocking others aside. The crowd erupts as Alita continues using the ball with deadly precision, even decapitating one cyborg in the chaos. The match quickly devolves into outright combat. Though smaller than many of her opponents, Alita defeats a massive rival with flawless technique. Mid-fight, Hugo calls out for help. Zappin has found him. Without hesitation, Alita abandons the arena and races to his aid, pursued by hunter warriors. When two of them corner her, she cleverly pulls one into another's blade, then manipulates the chains to crush the last attacker into the grinder. Alita reaches Hugo just as Zappin closes in. She kicks Zappin away, but then notices Hugo's face on a bounty notice. Hugo admits he dismantled cyborgs for parts, but swears he never killed anyone. Despite the truth, Alita chooses Hugo and smashes Zappin into a wall. When Zappin accuses her of violating hunter-warrior law by interfering, Alita calmly claims the bounty herself. As Alita hesitates, Zappin stabs Hugo. Centurions arrive to collect the reward, forcing Alita to flee with Hugo as he fades. She wants to bring him to Ito, but Hugo warns that the Centurions would kill them both. He confesses everything, his crimes, his guilt, and says he wanted out because he loved her. Chiron finds them, but when Vector contacts her, she lies and says they've disappeared. Later, Alita emerges holding Hugo's severed head. Zappin attempts to seize it, only for the Centurions to mistake his move as theft. In the chaos, Alita takes Zappin's sword and slices his face open. The following day, with Chiron's help, Hugo's head is attached to a cyborg body. Ito reveals a devastating truth. The only way to reach Salem is by becoming a motorball champion. There is no way to buy passage. He admits he knows because he was born in Salem, but his family was exiled by Nova due to their daughter's illness. Meanwhile, Vector questions Chiron for letting Alita escape. She declares that she is first and foremost a doctor and a mother, and ends their partnership. Though Vector tempts her with the promise of Salem, Chiron realizes it's not what she truly wants. As she walks away, something suddenly blocks her path. Alita then heads straight for Vector. When Centurions demand she surrender her weapon, she effortlessly slices through them with Zappin's blade. She crashes into Vector's office and confronts him over the lies he fed Hugo. Vector insists he keeps his promises and reveals the truth. The only thing ever sent to Salem are body parts, like Chiron's, delivered to Nova. Gruishka suddenly attacks, slamming Alita aside. In her pain, she recalls a buried memory, her squad advancing toward Salem through the connecting tubes, only to be annihilated by a defensive barrier. As she nearly fell, Gelda held onto her, urging her to complete the mission and destroy Salem. Alita's body regenerates mid-fight. When Gruishka attacks again, she slices through his grind cutters and cleaves him in half. Vector begs for mercy, but Alita instead calls out to Nova, who once again speaks through Vector's body. Nova admits that Alita has surpassed his expectations and says he'll allow her to live for now. He reminds her that others may not be so fortunate, hinting that Hugo can always be used against her. Enraged, Alita destroys Vector's body. Ito suddenly contacts Alita with terrible news. Hugo is being hunted and is heading toward Salem. Alita finds him climbing the massive tubes connecting the cities and begs him to stop. Hugo insists that staying in Iron City means certain death because of the bounty. Alita argues that this is exactly what Nova wants, to draw her out. Hugo claims they'll always be running, but Alita says that as long as they're together, it's enough. Just as Hugo begins to relent, Nova activates the barrier. Hugo is sliced apart and plummets down the tube. Alita reaches for him, but his cyborg body breaks apart. Hugo thanks her for saving him before falling away, leaving Alita screaming in anguish. Months later, Alita has risen as a contender in the Motorball Champions League. Though she now stands closer than ever to reaching Salem, her grief remains. As she steps into the arena, the crowd watches in awe, along with Nova, observing from above. Analysis: what if your body wasn't real, but your heart still was? Imagine waking up in a world where people replace limbs like spare parts, where memories can be lost, erased, or rewritten. And yet, the one thing no one can fully control is who you choose to be. That's the world of Alita, Battle Angel. At first glance, this movie looks like a typical futuristic action spectacle: neon-lit streets, high-speed combat, cybernetic warriors tearing each other apart. But here's the surprise. Alita isn't really about technology, robots, or even the future. It's about identity, it's about purpose, and most importantly, it's about what makes someone human, even when almost nothing about them is. This film quietly blends explosive action with genuine emotion, turning what could have been a shallow sci-fi blockbuster into a deeply personal coming-of-age story. And that's why, years after its release, people are still talking about it, still defending it, still asking for a sequel. So in this video, we're going to break down Alita, Battle Angel, from every angle: its story, themes, hidden details, ending, and why it connects so strongly with audiences despite its flaws. This isn't just a movie recap. This is the story of a warrior discovering her soul. Let's begin. Released in 2019, Alita, Battle Angel arrived with massive expectations and a lot of curiosity. Directed by Robert Rodriguez and produced by James Cameron, this wasn't a random studio experiment. Cameron had been trying to bring this story to the big screen for nearly 2 decades, waiting for technology to catch up with the vision. And when it finally did, the result was unlike anything else in modern sci-fi. The film blends multiple genres seamlessly: science fiction, cyberpunk, action, romance, and drama, but it never feels like it's juggling too much. Instead, it uses these elements to build a world that feels alive, dangerous, and emotionally grounded. The story is set in a distant future, long after a devastating war. High above the surface floats Salem, a mysterious sky city where the elite live in luxury. Below it lies Iron City, a gritty, overcrowded place built from scraps, where survival is a daily struggle and dreams feel permanently out of reach. At the center of this world is a simple but powerful premise. A cybernetic girl is found discarded in a junkyard, rebuilt by a kind doctor, and given a second chance at life, without any memory of who she once was. No spoilers here, but that lost past is the key, because as she learns to walk, talk, and live again, it becomes clear that she's not ordinary. Her body may be artificial, but her emotions are real. And her forgotten history could change everything. This movie doesn't rush its setup. It invites you into its world, lets you feel its weight, and quietly prepares you for a story that's far more personal than the explosive visuals suggest. This isn't just about the future, it's about starting over. At its core, Alita, Battle Angel is a cyberpunk story with a human heart. Yes, it's packed with high-energy action, futuristic weapons, and gravity-defying combat, but those are just the surface. Beneath the metal and neon lies a deeply emotional coming-of-age journey. Genre-wise, the film blends science fiction, cyberpunk, action, and romance, but it refuses to stay in one lane. One moment it feels like a brutal survival story. The next, it slows down into something intimate and personal. That contrast is intentional and powerful. The central theme is identity. If your memories are gone, who are you really? Alita doesn't just fight enemies. She fights confusion, self-doubt, and the fear of being less than human because of her mechanical body. The movie constantly asks whether humanity is defined by flesh or by choices. Another major theme is freedom versus control. Iron City is a place designed to keep people dreaming but never reaching. Above them hangs Salem, perfect, untouchable, and watching. It's a visual reminder of a system built to separate the powerful from the forgotten. Emotionally, the film balances hope and tragedy. There's innocence in Alita's curiosity, pain in her losses, and strength in her refusal to accept the world as it is. That emotional range is what makes her journey resonate. As for the audience, this movie isn't just for hardcore sci-fi fans. It's for anyone who enjoys stories about self-discovery, resilience, and fighting for purpose in a world that's stacked against you. Because when you strip away the steel and circuitry, Alita, Battle Angel isn't really about the future. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be, the story of Alita. Battle Angel begins in a place where hope goes to die, the scrapyards of Iron City. Among mountains of discarded metal and forgotten machines, Dr. Dyson Ito discovers something extraordinary, the remains of a cyborg girl. Her body is broken, her past erased, but her brain is intact. Ito rebuilds her, gives her a new body, and names her Alita. When Alita awakens, she's like a child in an adult world. She doesn't remember who she was, but she feels everything intensely: wonder, joy, fear, and pain. As she explores Iron City, she quickly learns this is not a safe place. Violence is normal, trust is rare. And survival often comes at a cost. Slowly, cracks begin to form in her innocence. Moments of danger trigger something buried deep inside her, instinctive combat skills she can't explain. Alita doesn't know where this strength comes from, but it's clear she was built for more than survival. She was built for war. As she grows closer to Hugo, a street-smart dreamer obsessed with reaching the floating city of Salem, Alita starts to understand desire, the desire to belong, to love, and to protect. But the world around her is unforgiving. Dreams are exploited, people are used, and hope is often a trap. Her path eventually pulls her into Iron City's brutal underworld of hunter warriors and motorball, where strength earns respect and weakness gets you killed. With every fight, Alita becomes more aware of who she might have been and who she is choosing to become. This isn't just a rise of a hero story, it's a journey of awakening. Alita's battles aren't only against enemies made of steel and flesh. They're against the truth of a broken system, the pain of lost identity, and the realization that discovering who you are can be just as dangerous as forgetting it. And by the time she's ready to stand and fight for herself, the world is no longer prepared to underestimate her, because the girl who woke up in the scrapyard was never meant to stay there. The ending of Alita. Battle Angel isn't about closure, it's about clarity. By the time the final act arrives, Alita has already changed. She's no longer the innocent girl wandering Iron City in awe of everything around her. She now understands the truth of this world, how it feeds on dreams, how it rewards cruelty, and how power hides behind layers of distance and control. What actually happens in the end is simple on the surface. Conflicts are settled, losses are felt, and Alita survives. But emotionally, something much bigger takes place. Alita realizes that her true enemy isn't just the people standing in front of her, it's the system itself. The floating city of Salem, watching from above, represents unreachable perfection, an illusion sold to keep people obedient. And for the first time, Alita stops chasing dreams that were planted by others. Instead, she chooses intent. The final moments show Alita standing, sword in hand, looking upward, not with hope but with resolve. This isn't a victory pose, it's a declaration. She now knows who she is, what she's capable of, and what must be confronted next. Symbolically, the ending represents a shift from awakening to purpose. Alita doesn't win the war, but she becomes ready to fight it, and that's why the ending feels both powerful and frustrating. It gives emotional completion, but leaves the larger story unfinished. There's also room for interpretation. Is Alita driven by revenge, justice, or liberation? The film deliberately blurs that line, suggesting that her journey forward won't be simple or clean. In the end, Alita, Battle Angel doesn't close a chapter, it draws a line in the sand. And it tells us this story was never meant to end here, only to begin. One of the reasons Alita, Battle Angel stays in your mind long after the credits roll is because so much of its meaning is hidden in plain sight. Let's start with the most talked about detail, Alita's eyes. They're larger than normal, not because of style alone, but symbolism. Those wide eyes represent innocence, curiosity, and emotional openness. In a world where most characters hide behind armor, upgrades, or cruelty, Alita feels everything. Her eyes visually separate her from the cold, mechanical society around her. They're a constant reminder that despite her metal body, she's emotionally more human than most people she meets. Then there's her body evolution. Every upgrade Alita receives mirrors her inner transformation. She doesn't become stronger just to fight better. She becomes stronger because she's learning who she is. Her most powerful body isn't given as a reward. It's reclaimed, symbolizing ownership of identity rather than dependence on others. The cities themselves are loaded with meaning. Iron City is chaotic, overcrowded, and built from scraps, representing stagnation and survival without progress. People live day to day, chasing dreams they can never reach. Above it floats Salem, perfectly clean, silent, and distant. It's not just a city, it's an illusion of hope, dangling just far enough away to keep people obedient. Watch closely, and you'll notice foreshadowing everywhere. Alita's instinctive fighting style appears long before her past is revealed. Casual dialogue hints that she's more than she seems. Even background graffiti and architecture subtly reference cycles of destruction and rebirth, mirroring her journey. There are also nods to the original manga for longtime fans, combat poses, character designs, and specific weapons that quietly honor the source material without overwhelming new viewers. None of these details are accidental. They're there to reinforce one core idea. This isn't a story about a robot becoming human. It's about a human spirit refusing to disappear, even when the world tries to erase it. What makes Alita, Battle Angel even more fascinating is what happened behind the camera. This film wasn't created overnight. In fact, James Cameron had been trying to bring Alita to the big screen for nearly 20 years. The project was delayed again and again, not because of lack of interest, but because the technology needed to capture a fully digital character with real emotional depth simply didn't exist yet. That's where performance capture changed everything. Rosa Salazar didn't just voice Alita, she became her. Wearing a motion capture suit and facial tracking rig, Salazar performed every scene physically, allowing her expressions, movements, and emotional nuance to drive the CGI rather than replace it. That's why Alita feels alive instead of artificial. The action scenes also weren't handled like typical CGI chaos. Fight choreography was designed to feel grounded and intentional, inspired by real martial arts and body mechanics. Animators didn't exaggerate movement, they followed human motion to keep Alita believable, even during superhuman moments. There were creative risks, too. Some darker and more complex storylines from the original manga were intentionally simplified to make the film more accessible to a global audience. Several subplots and character arcs were trimmed or removed entirely to keep the focus on Alita's emotional journey. Fun detail: many actors trained extensively, even though much of the final product would be enhanced digitally. The goal was realism first, spectacle second. In a time when CGI-heavy films often feel weightless, Alita, Battle Angel stands out because its technology serves the performance, not the other way around. And that commitment is exactly why the character feels real enough for audiences to care about her long after the screen fades to black. To truly understand what makes Alita, Battle Angel unique, it helps to see it alongside other films in the same genre. At first glance, comparisons to Blade Runner or Ghost in the Shell feel inevitable. All three explore futuristic societies where technology blurs the line between human and machine. But where those films lean heavily into cold philosophy and atmosphere, Alita chooses something different: emotional accessibility. Blade Runner asks what it means to be human through silence and ambiguity. Ghost in the Shell questions identity through existential detachment. Alita, on the other hand, answers those same questions through emotion, connection, and choice. It doesn't distance the audience, it pulls them in. There are also surface-level comparisons to action-driven sci-fi like Ready Player One, but while that film thrives on spectacle and nostalgia, Alita grounds its action in character. Every fight matters because it's tied directly to Alita's growth, not just visual excitement. When compared to its original manga and anime roots, the differences become clearer. The source material dives deeper into politics, brutality, and moral ambiguity. The film simplifies some of that complexity, but in return, it offers a more focused emotional journey, especially for first-time viewers. Where the movie falls short is scale. It feels like the first chapter of a much larger saga, while many comparable films tell complete stories in a single installment. That's both its weakness and its promise. Ultimately, Alita. Battle Angel may not be the most philosophical or the most complex cyberpunk film, but it might be one of the most sincere. And in a genre often dominated by cold ideas and distant characters, that sincerity is what sets it apart. When Alita, Battle Angel was released, the reaction was divided. Critics were cautious. Some praised the groundbreaking visual effects and Rosa Salazar's performance, calling Alita one of the most emotionally convincing CGI characters ever created. Others felt the story played it too safe, arguing that the world building and villains didn't go deep enough for a cyberpunk epic. But here's where things get interesting. While critics debated structure and pacing, audiences connected. Viewers responded strongly to Alita herself, her innocence, her strength, and her emotional honesty. Many fans felt the movie was judged unfairly, dismissed as style over substance, when in reality its substance was just quieter and more personal than expected. Over time, the film began to gain something rare, a loyal fanbase. Online discussions, fan campaigns, and repeated calls for a sequel turned Alita into a cult favorite. People didn't just like the movie, they felt protective of it. That kind of response doesn't happen unless a story hits an emotional nerve. Financially, the movie performed solidly, especially internationally, proving there was real global interest. But its true success came later, through word of mouth and rewatch value. So is Alita, Battle Angel underrated? For many fans, absolutely. It's not a movie everyone loved immediately, but it's one that grew stronger with time. And sometimes those are the stories that last the longest. So after everything we've explored, what does Alita, Battle Angel ultimately leave us with? At its best, this movie delivers a rare combination, spectacle with sincerity. Its greatest strength is Alita herself. She's not written as a symbol or a concept, she's written as a person. Her emotional honesty carries the film, turning high-speed action and futuristic chaos into something deeply personal. Visually, the movie is stunning, but it never feels empty because the effects exist to serve the character, not overshadow her. The world building is ambitious, the action is impactful, and the themes, identity, freedom, and purpose, resonate more than you might expect from a blockbuster. That said, the film isn't flawless. Some villains feel underdeveloped. Certain storylines clearly exist to set up future chapters that never arrived, and for viewers expecting a complete, self-contained epic, the ending may feel abrupt. But that incompleteness is also part of its identity. Alita, Battle Angel feels like the opening move in a much larger story, one fueled by heart rather than cynicism. It doesn't try to be clever, it tries to be honest. So who should watch it? If you enjoy sci-fi with emotion, cyberpunk worlds with soul, and stories about self-discovery and resilience, this film is absolutely worth your time. Final verdict, Alita. Battle Angel is a flawed but powerful sci-fi experience, one that earns its place not through perfection but through passion. And sometimes, that's what makes a movie unforgettable. REVIWS. Set 3 centuries after a catastrophic global conflict known as the Fall, the world of Alita, Battle Angel presents a stark contrast between hope and decay. High above the ruins floats Salem, the last pristine city in the sky, while below it sprawls Iron City, a harsh, overcrowded slum where most of humanity struggles to survive. Goods travel upward from Iron City's factories, but no one is ever allowed to ascend. At least, that's what people are told. In this unforgiving environment lives Dr. Dyson Ito, played by Christoph Waltz, a compassionate cybernetics doctor who replaces robotic limbs for the poor. In his spare time, he scavenges discarded cyborg parts that fall from Salem. One night, he discovers the remains of a young female cyborg and rebuilds her, naming her Alita after his deceased daughter. Alita awakens with no memories of her past, essentially starting life over from scratch. She soon befriends Hugo, who introduces her to Iron City's most popular and brutal sport, motorball. Meanwhile, Ito's estranged wife, Dr. Kyron Jennifer Connolly, works under the powerful crime boss Vector, Mahershala Ali, who secretly controls much of the city. A disturbing subplot involves young women being murdered for their cybernetic parts, though this darker thread never quite develops into the compelling mystery it initially promises. Surprisingly, the opening portion of the film works very well. I even found myself liking Alita's large, expressive eyes. They fit the tone better than expected. That said, Iron City feels a bit too clean. It could have benefited from more grit and grime. Motorball, unfortunately, didn't work for me at all. It feels like a futuristic version of Rollerball and pushes the film toward a pulpy, B-movie atmosphere. The first major alleyway cyborg fight is genuinely exciting, but after that, the action begins to feel repetitive. The story drifts further into territory that never fully captures interest, and while I expected the narrative to rise to another level, perhaps with a deeper exploration of Salem, it never quite gets there. Despite a strong start, the movie gradually loses momentum, which was disappointing. As a big-budget adaptation of a Japanese manga, the film clearly benefits from Robert Rodriguez's energetic direction and the massive resources behind it. James Cameron's influence is everywhere, especially in the visual effects. It looks and feels very much like one of his projects. Unfortunately, his storytelling fingerprints are also visible in the script, which feels clunky and overly focused on setting up future sequels rather than telling a complete, satisfying story. Once again set 300 years in the future, with a slickly redesigned studio logo to match, the film emphasizes the divide between Iron City and Salem. People believe the only way up is to win a rare, elite motorball championship. Ito, who is secretly a hunter-warrior, is also driven by personal tragedy and seems to know more about Salem than he lets on. Kyron, equally informed, is desperate to return there by any means necessary. Alita, despite appearing innocent and naive, proves to be exceptionally skilled in combat and motorball alike. Her abilities draw the attention of Vector, while her relationship with Hugo becomes a central emotional thread. The world building is visually impressive, but the action scenes eventually start to blend together. The film wears its influences on its sleeve. Blade Runner, Tron, Legacy, RoboCop, and Rollerball are all clearly felt. What's missing is a truly sharp narrative edge to tie it all together. From a business standpoint, the movie's journey is almost as interesting as the film itself. When the first trailer dropped, I honestly thought hardly anyone would show up to watch it. Ironically, it became Robert Rodriguez's most commercially successful release. Worldwide, it pulled in over $400 million, which sounds impressive until you consider the massive production and marketing costs. By most estimates, it either barely broke even or lost money. It's funny thinking about these numbers when I'm stressing over everyday expenses, while studios casually debate losses in the tens of millions. That amount alone could have funded multiple cult classics. Still, the real question remains: how did a manga series by Yukito Kishiro from the 1990s even make it to Hollywood screens? The answer traces back to Guillermo del Toro, who first introduced the property to James Cameron long before Avatar. The project sat dormant for years, until Cameron finally pushed it forward, handing Robert Rodriguez a massive script and hundreds of pages of notes to condense into a filmable story. That process ultimately gave us Alita, Battle Angel, a visually striking, occasionally thrilling, but ultimately uneven film that shows flashes of greatness without ever fully reaching its potential. The story truly begins when a brilliant cybernetic doctor and occasional bounty hunter, Dyson Ito, discovers the remains of a female cyborg buried among the scrap heaps of Iron City. Though her body is beyond repair, her human brain is intact. Moved by the loss of his own daughter, Ito restores her and gives her the name Alita. As she awakens, Alita is immediately fascinated by the bustling city around her and begins forming connections with the people in Ito's life, including his former partner Kyron and a street-smart boy named Hugo, who introduces her to the city's most dangerous obsession. Motorball, but Hugo isn't as innocent as he seems. Behind his charming exterior lies a connection to Vector, the powerful figure who controls both Iron City and the brutal sport that defines it. Alita also stumbles upon a secret of her own guardian. Ito isn't just a scientist, he's a hunter-warrior. When she secretly follows him one night, Alita proves her worth by saving him from a vicious gang of cyborg assassins. Among them is the monstrous Gruishka, a relentless force who becomes Alita's primary tormentor throughout the film. As Alita begins experiencing fragments of her forgotten past, she realizes she was once a berserker, an elite warrior from a long-lost war involving the United Republics of Mars. Determined to fight back, she registers as a hunter-warrior herself, hoping to unite others against Gruishka. that hope quickly fades when no one is willing to stand beside her. The confrontation that follows nearly destroys her entirely, and she survives only through the combined efforts of Ito, Hugo, and a seasoned warrior named McTeague. Reborn in a powerful berserker body, Alita finds new purpose in motorball, where she rises rapidly through the ranks and dominates the competition. But victory comes at a devastating cost. Manipulated by Nova and his agents, Alita loses the person she loves most. By the film's end, she stands alone, celebrated as a motorball champion, yet fueled by grief and resolve, vowing that this is only the beginning of her fight. Despite its massive budget and uncertain financial return, the film's visual ambition is undeniable. Ironically, this movie also marks the end of an era, being the final project released before Fox was absorbed by Disney, an outcome that eerily mirrors the corporate-controlled future depicted on-screen. I'll admit I was skeptical at first. As someone who grew up loving the original animated manga, the idea of a Western live-action adaptation didn't immediately sit right with me. That hesitation only grew knowing this wasn't a Japanese production. Still, I gave the 2019 film a chance, and I'm glad I did. Any doubts I had were completely erased. From start to finish, the movie is an exhilarating ride. If I had to sum it up in one word, it would simply be, wow. The narrative is engaging, fast-paced, and emotionally grounded, pulling you in almost immediately and refusing to let go. The performances elevate the material even further. Rosa Salazar delivers a standout portrayal, bringing heart, innocence, and strength to Alita in a way that truly carries the film. Supporting performances across the board are equally impressive, adding depth and personality to the world. Visually, the film is nothing short of spectacular. The CGI, especially Alita herself, is remarkably detailed and convincing. While her large, animated eyes may feel unusual at first, they quickly become part of her identity, reinforcing the anime-inspired roots of the character rather than detracting from them. The action sequences are fluid, intense, and beautifully choreographed, making full use of the film's futuristic setting. While this isn't necessarily a movie aimed at older audiences, it clearly caters more to teens and young adults. It succeeds wonderfully within that space. It feels like anime brought into the real world, unapologetically stylized and emotionally earnest. Though it may not resonate equally with everyone, it left me thoroughly entertained. In the end, Alita. Battle Angel is bold, visually stunning, and far better than many expected. It may not have reshaped cinema, but it delivered a memorable experience, and honestly, it just looks incredible. Alita is introduced as a warrior possessing the rare and long-forgotten martial discipline known as Panzerkunst, an advanced combat system designed specifically for mechanical bodies in the distant future. She is brought back to life after being discovered in an Iron City scrapyard by cybernetic Dr. Dyson Ito, who rebuilds her using a temporary synthetic body once meant for his deceased daughter. Later, Alita is given a far more powerful berserker body, a relic from the wars of the United Republics of Mars. The film delivers plenty of high-energy action, though it sometimes stretches believability. Despite her youthful appearance and fragmented memories, Alita often overwhelms groups of heavily armed cyborg enemies with surprising ease. While visually impressive, this imbalance can make some battles feel less tense than intended. A significant portion of the narrative revolves around motorball, Iron City's brutal and wildly popular combat sport, clearly inspired by the violent futurism of the 1975 film Rollerball. Alita's effortless victory against second-league competitors in her very first match strongly signals sequel potential, as the story all but promises her eventual rise to the First League and Ultimate Championship. Originally envisioned as a James Cameron directing project, the film instead places him in a producer role alongside John Landau, with Robert Rodriguez taking over directing duties. Drawing from the original manga source material, the film is set in the year 2563, long after Earth has been nearly destroyed by a massive conflict known as the Fall. The story begins when Dr. Ito uncovers a discarded female cyborg head containing a fully intact human brain. After rebuilding her, she awakens with no memory of her past or identity, and Ito names her Alita in honor of his late daughter. As she explores Iron City, Alita forms a close bond with Hugo, a young man who dreams of escaping to the floating city of Salem, a symbol of wealth and privilege hovering above the slums. Through Hugo, Alita learns about motorball, a deadly sport where cyborg competitors fight at high speed in a violent race for survival. Meanwhile, she begins to sense that Ito is hiding secrets of his own. Following him one night, Alita discovers that he is a hunter-warrior, an elite bounty hunter, and soon they are ambushed by a group of cyborg killers led by the monstrous Gruishka. When Ito is badly injured, Alita instinctively fights back, destroying two attackers and forcing Gruishka to retreat. Although Alita begins to reclaim her Panzer Kunstabilities, Ito strongly discourages her from pursuing a life as a hunter-warrior. This tension grows when Alita discovers a dormant berserker body outside the city. Recognizing its dangerous potential, Ito refuses to attach her to it, fearing the destruction it could bring. Frustrated, Alita registers as a hunter-warrior herself and attempts to gather help at the Kansas bar to hunt down Gruishka, only to be turned away. Moments later, Gruishka, now upgraded and more lethal, storms the bar and reveals that he was sent by the mysterious Nova to eliminate her. Although Alita fights bravely, her body is nearly destroyed before Gruishka is driven off. Realizing there is no other choice, Ito finally transfers Alita into the berserker body, which instantly synchronizes with her mind. With renewed strength, she enters motorball tryouts, hoping to win enough fame and fortune to help Hugo reach Salem. However, Ito soon uncovers a darker truth. The motorball race is a trap. Many competitors are hunter-warriors and criminals secretly hired by Vector, a powerful figure working under Nova, to assassinate Alita during the match. Despite the danger, Alita dominates the race, until she abandons it to rescue Hugo, who has been framed for murder by the bounty hunter Zappin. Zappin reveals that Hugo has been stealing cyborg parts for Vector, manipulated by false promises of entry into Salem. Exploiting Alita's feelings, Zappin mortally wounds Hugo and forces her to choose between killing him herself or watching him die. Hugo is saved at the last moment by Keean, Ito's estranged ex-wife, who preserves his life by temporarily linking his head to Alita's heart. Later, Hugo receives a new cyborg body, and the truth finally comes out. Vector lied. The only way into Salem is by becoming a motorball champion, something Hugo was never meant to achieve. This revelation cements Alita's resolve and sets the stage for a much larger conflict yet to come. Alita eventually chooses to face Vector, who is nothing more than a puppet under the control of Nova, the mysterious and powerful scientist ruling from Salem. Speaking through Vector, Nova finally reveals himself and commands his enforcer Gruishka to eliminate her once and for all. What follows is a brutal confrontation in which Alita overcomes Gruishka permanently. She then turns her blade on Vector, warning Nova that his greatest mistake was underestimating her strength and resolve. Shortly afterward, Ito informs Alita that Hugo has disappeared. She tracks him down and finds him recklessly trying to climb one of the massive factory tubes leading up to Salem. Alita begs him to come back, but Nova activates a deadly ring of rotating blades. The trap tears Hugo apart mid-climb, sending him falling into the abyss. Alita can't save him, but in his final moments, Hugo thanks her for changing his life before letting go. Time passes, and Alita rises as a celebrated competitor in the motorball arena. As the crowd roars, she raises her sword toward Salem itself, a silent challenge, while Nova watches from above. The supporting cast includes Isa Gonzalez, Michelle Rodriguez, Casper Van Dien, Jeff Fahey, Lana Condor, Jorge Lendeborg Jr., Rick Yoon, and Derek Mears. Rosa Salazar's performance stands out. Her wide-eyed appearance recalls something almost painterly, yet she convincingly grows from an innocent cyborg into a hardened warrior. Christoph Waltz is warm and engaging as her protector and mentor. Jennifer Connelly is serviceable, and Mahershala Ali plays the antagonist with quiet menace. There's no denying the film's visual power. The special effects are stunning, the cyberpunk world is richly detailed, and the core idea of a heroine rediscovering her identity works well. However, the movie often rushes headfirst into high-energy action, especially during motorball sequences and graphic cyborg combat, sometimes at the expense of narrative clarity. At moments, the story feels scattered, leaning more toward visual spectacle than emotional depth. Ultimately, it's an average futuristic sci-fi action film elevated by its presentation. The story is set in the year 2563, centuries after a catastrophic event known as the Fall. The narrative unfolds in Iron City, a grim industrial sprawl overshadowed by the pristine floating city of Salem above. While scavenging in the city's scrapyard, Dr. Dyson Ito discovers the remains of a female cyborg whose brain is miraculously still alive. He places her brain into a body originally built for his deceased daughter, and when she awakens with no memories, he names her Alita. As Ito introduces her to the dangers of this harsh world, Alita befriends Hugo, who opens her eyes to motorball, a violent sport where cyborgs compete for a chance to ascend to Salem. She soon learns that Ito is secretly a hunter-warrior, and when he's attacked by assassins, Alita instinctively defends him using combat techniques thought long forgotten. It becomes clear she is far more than she seems. The early portions of the film move at a measured pace, focusing on world building and character introductions. Once the action accelerates, it becomes thrilling and occasionally shocking, despite much of the violence involving machines rather than humans. A strong sense of mystery surrounds Alita, and her journey of self-discovery unfolds gradually alongside the audience's understanding of her past. The cast performs well overall, with Salazar delivering an especially compelling lead performance. Though Alita is digitally created, she feels remarkably real, aside from her distinctive eyes. The action sequences are impressively grounded, even when logic suggests otherwise. The only minor drawback is Motorball itself. Its presentation, complete with commentary, evokes memories of pod racing mixed with rollerball, though this is a small complaint. The ending clearly sets the stage for future installments, and by the final scene, I was genuinely hoping for more. I watched this at home on Blu-ray, and the collaboration between James Cameron's storytelling vision and Robert Rodriguez's energetic direction is evident throughout. Set in a distant future shaped by wars between Earth and Mars, the film presents a world of ruined cities, bounty-hunting cyborgs, and lost humanity. It's visually striking, action-packed, and imperfect, but engaging enough to leave you wanting the story to continue. He salvages what remains of the mysterious cyborg and brings her back to his workshop, carefully replacing damaged limbs, restoring her face, and rebuilding her body piece by piece. When she finally awakens, we learn that she is not only far more advanced than she appears, but also centuries old, nearly 300 years, in fact. Through motion capture and digital performance, Rosa Salazar brings this character to life, and the Doctor names her Alita. The character and her story originate from a well-known Japanese manga series that first gained popularity in the 1990s. Alita's design reflects that heritage perfectly. She has an almost innocent, angelic appearance, yet beneath it lies a highly trained warrior built for combat, hence the title Alita, Battle Angel. As the story unfolds, Alita is inevitably drawn toward confrontation, using both her intelligence and combat skills to challenge a powerful and deeply corrupt figure who controls much of this world from above. However, the film's 2-hour runtime ends just as she is finally ready to confront him, standing on the brink of ascending to the legendary floating city. This is clearly meant to set up a sequel, and while that promise is exciting, it is also my biggest frustration with the film. The story stops rather than concludes, leaving viewers with a sense of incompleteness. I'll absolutely watch the follow-up when it arrives, but I can't help wishing this film had delivered a stronger sense of closure on its own. That said, the Blu-ray release does include an impressive collection of bonus features, covering the origins of the project, the evolution of the technology, and the sheer scale of effort that went into bringing this world to life. After seeing those extras, it becomes clear that this 2-hour movie represents years of work by thousands of artists and technicians. In hindsight, I almost wish I had explored some of that material before watching the film itself. There's an enormous amount happening in this movie, far more than I expected, and within the first half hour, it becomes obvious that Alita, Battle Angel might have benefited from being told as a multi-episode series rather than a single feature film. That feeling only grows stronger as the story expands. Its manga roots are unmistakable, and it's easy to imagine this world thriving as a long-running anime. Along the way, the film echoes influences from major video game franchises like Final Fantasy, classic sci-fi such as Blade Runner, AI, artificial intelligence, and RoboCop, high-concept sports fantasies reminiscent of Rollerball or Mario Kart, and the darker tone of gritty American graphic novels by creators like Frank Miller or Alan Moore. The cast assembled here is remarkably strong. Familiar and beloved faces like Jennifer Connelly, Christoph Waltz, and Mahershala Ali are joined by talented performers who may be less recognizable to some viewers, along with Rosa Salazar, who stands out despite being hidden beneath layers of CGI. Even through motion capture, she conveys emotion, vulnerability, strength, and curiosity with impressive depth. From a technical standpoint, the film is undeniably impressive. Director Robert Rodriguez, alongside producer and co-writer James Cameron and co-writer Lita Kalogridis, has helped craft a densely layered world inspired by Yukito Kishiro's original work. While some digital elements, particularly certain motorball competitors, aren't entirely seamless, the vast majority of the visuals are striking, detailed, and immersive. Alita herself exists in that delicate space near the uncanny valley, but she largely succeeds in feeling expressive and alive. The production design across the board is outstanding. Sets, costumes, vehicles, weapons, cyborg designs, and environments all feel carefully imagined and visually rich. Combined with strong action choreography, confident direction, and committed performances, the film delivers a world that is genuinely exciting to explore. Within just over 2 hours, the story attempts to tackle a huge range of themes: identity, memory, class division, ambition, corruption, grief, power, exploitation, and moral conflict. We follow an amnesiac girl discovering both the world around her and the truth of who she is, alongside a father figure struggling to protect her as she seeks independence. These ideas are compelling, but there are moments where the film tries to handle too much at once. Some scenes feel overly blunt or heavy-handed, with dialogue or visual cues that undercut their own impact rather than enhancing it. Even so, Alita, Battle Angel remains an energetic, visually stunning, and highly entertaining experience. It's ambitious to a fault, bursting with ideas, characters, and concepts that might have flourished even more if given additional space to breathe. Despite its flaws, it's hard not to admire the scale of imagination on display, and harder still not to want to return to this world when the story continues. One of the film's most noticeable issues is how aggressively the story is pushed forward. The pacing often feels unnaturally rushed, as if the narrative is being squeezed into a fixed runtime rather than allowed to unfold organically. Because of this, many ideas arrive quickly and leave just as fast, never fully settling or resolving in a satisfying way. It's hard not to feel that the film would have been far better served by a more episodic structure, or even by splitting the story across additional installments. Giving the material more room would have allowed its themes, characters, and conflicts to breathe and evolve naturally instead of competing for attention. The movie clearly wants to be many things at once, carrying an overwhelming number of ideas, tones, and narrative threads. Even scratching the surface barely captures how much is packed into its runtime. On top of that, it's obvious the story is written with future sequels in mind. Several elements are introduced only to be sidelined or left hanging, reinforcing the sense that this chapter is laying groundwork rather than standing entirely on its own. Some characters, despite strong casting, barely have the opportunity to shine, feeling underused in such a dense narrative. That said, the screenplay itself is far from careless. While it occasionally buckles under its own ambition, it is thoughtfully constructed and clearly crafted with passion. Every component, from character arcs to world building, feels deliberately designed, even if the end result is somewhat overloaded. The film's biggest flaw is not a lack of vision, but an excess of it. Still, despite its indulgences, the movie ultimately succeeds in what it sets out to do and often exceeds expectations. Over the course of its runtime, the film cycles through an astonishing range of tones. It is heartfelt and corny, violent and exhilarating, dramatic and awe-inducing. At times it feels inventive and stylish, at others overwhelming and decadent. It can be slick, vibrant, and visually stunning all at once, occasionally tipping into excess, but never without energy. It throws everything it has at the screen, and more often than not, that ambition pays off. Visually, this is an undeniably lavish production, saturated with detail and spectacle. Viewers looking for a fast-paced science fiction action experience will find themselves constantly engaged, sometimes almost to the point of sensory overload. There is so much happening that fully processing it requires more time than the runtime allows. Even after the credits roll, the film invites continued reflection and analysis. Ultimately, this is a movie that rewards viewers willing to embrace it on its own terms. While it may be imperfect and overly ambitious, it is also bold, imaginative, and executed with remarkable care. Despite its flaws, and perhaps partly because of them, it stands as a thrilling and memorable cinematic experience. It earns a strong, enthusiastic recommendation, with the understanding that its ideas take far longer to digest than the 2 hours it takes to watch. Set in a distant future shaped by catastrophe, the story unfolds centuries after a devastating global conflict reshaped the world. At its center is a powerful cyborg warrior, long forgotten and discarded, who is unexpectedly given a second chance at life by a compassionate cybernetic doctor. What follows is a high-energy origin story steeped in post-apocalyptic imagery, cyberpunk aesthetics, and stylized action. The director's signature approach is immediately recognizable. As with much of his past work, the emphasis leans heavily toward visual flair and kinetic action rather than deep narrative complexity. The result is a film that prioritizes momentum, spectacle, and style, essentially cinematic indulgence designed to entertain first and question later. It's loud, fast, occasionally absurd, but undeniably engaging. The action sequences stand out as a major highlight, delivering dynamic combat that rivals some of the most iconic science fiction battles of the genre. Behind the scenes, the project carries the imprint of a legendary filmmaker who originally intended to direct it himself, before commitments to an expansive franchise forced him to step aside. Even so, his influence remains deeply embedded in the film's DNA, from its world building to its emotional beats. In the end, this is a spectacle-driven science fiction epic that may follow familiar narrative paths, but does so with confidence, ambition, and undeniable style. It may not be flawless, but it is certainly memorable, and for viewers willing to immerse themselves fully, it offers an experience that is both thrilling and visually unforgettable. Fortunately, Robert Rodriguez ultimately took control of the project, with James Cameron staying closely involved as both writer and producer. Fans of Yukito Kishiro's original manga will be relieved to know that Alita, Battle Angel remains largely faithful to the spirit of its source, especially in its characters and central conflicts. That said, Rodriguez wisely softens the more extreme brutality found in the manga to steer clear of an R rating. As a result, some of the more graphic moments, such as Gruishka's truly horrifying acts in the original material, are noticeably restrained. After discovering and reviving Alita, Dr. Ito outfits her with a fully functional cyborg body that he had originally designed for his late, physically impaired daughter. When Alita awakens, she marvels at the elegant craftsmanship of her new form. Ito soon reveals that she is over 300 years old and hints at her mysterious past as an elite battle warrior unlike any other. Much like the amnesiac hero in the Jason Bourne films, Alita has no conscious memory of her former life until combat awakens something buried deep within her. During moments of danger, fragments of her past resurface, especially when she instinctively performs the ancient combat discipline known as Panzerkunst. Even though she struggles to understand these flashes of memory, one thing becomes clear. Once Alita enters full combat mode, her small frame is deceiving. She is swift, lethal, and utterly fearless. This is especially evident in her repeated confrontations with Gruishka, a massive and intimidating half-human, half-cyborg brute. Their encounters echo a futuristic version of the David versus Goliath tale. Despite being vastly outmatched in size and raw power, Alita never retreats. Even when she is nearly destroyed, reduced to little more than a head, torso, and a single arm, she refuses to surrender. Few films have portrayed a female cyborg warrior with such relentless ferocity and determination. Alita's agility, precision, and timing allow her to humiliate opponents far larger than herself. In one particularly memorable moment, Gruishka upgrades himself with a terrifying weapon, mechanical fingers that transform into high-speed, chain-like grappling hooks capable of striking unsuspecting targets almost instantly. He stands as one of Alita's most dangerous and persistent enemies throughout the film. As Alita gains new limbs and enhanced mobility, she also begins to learn about the world around her: Iron City, the floating metropolis of Salem, and the violent sport known as motorball. Earth has been devastated by a catastrophic war, leaving only one massive city in the sky intact. Salem hovers above the wasteland below, sustained by factories and farms that exploit the land beneath it to serve its wealthy inhabitants. Below Salem lies Iron City, a multilingual, crowded settlement populated by survivors from across the globe. These refugees live in the shadow of the floating city, working tirelessly to support it while dreaming of one day ascending into its paradise. Towering tubes connect Salem to the surface, transporting goods upward, but never people. Entry into Salem is forbidden, guarded by ruthless defensive measures. In this sense, the film strongly recalls themes seen in Elysium, where social inequality is physically represented by a city in the sky beyond the reach of the poor. The film also draws inspiration from classic sports-based dystopias. Motorball, a brutal, high-speed competition, feels like a futuristic evolution of rollerball. Victory is often determined by survival rather than skill alone, echoing the savage spectacle of ancient gladiatorial combat. According to Iron City legend, only the greatest motorball champion earns the chance to reach Salem. The motorball sequences are among the movie's most thrilling moments, featuring chaotic races filled with wildly designed cyborgs crashing into one another like a high-tech demolition derby. Some competitors look as though they've wandered in from a Transformers-style battlefield. Beyond the physical threats, Alita must also contend with shadowy figures pulling the strings. She clashes with the enforcers of Vector, the calculating power broker who controls motorball betting, while an even greater menace lurks above Nova, an unseen mastermind manipulating events from Salem itself. Overall, Alita, Battle Angel delivers an energetic and highly entertaining experience. When Rodriguez isn't overwhelming the screen with jaw-dropping CGI and gravity-defying action, he showcases a surprisingly strong ensemble cast. Backed by a staggering production budget of roughly $170 million, the film concludes on a bold cliffhanger that clearly sets the stage for future installments. Whether a sequel ever materializes, however, depends entirely on box office performance. Still, as it stands, Alita, Battle Angel offers a visually rich, action-packed journey that leaves audiences eager for more. Alita, portrayed with remarkable precision by Rosa Salazar, is discovered in a scrapyard and restored by Dr. Ito, played by Christoph Waltz, a compassionate scientist hiding a complicated past. Through his work, Alita becomes just one among many cyborgs he repairs, yet it's immediately clear there's something different about her. She awakens with no memory of who she was, but whenever violence erupts, fragments of her past begin to surface through sudden flashes, hinting at a forgotten identity far more powerful than she realizes. Almost instantly, perhaps a little too quickly, Alita forms a romantic bond with Hugo, a charming but secretive young man who dreams of escaping the bleak reality of Iron City. Their shared desire for a better life becomes a core emotional thread in the film. For some viewers, this romance works effectively. For others, it feels rushed or underdeveloped. Both reactions are understandable, and whether it resonates will largely depend on the viewer. One of the most debated aspects of the film is Alita's appearance. The decision to closely mirror her manga design, particularly her large, expressive eyes, was a clear risk. Some viewers see this as a textbook example of the uncanny valley, while others, myself included, find that it ultimately works. After all, her face isn't the only indicator that she isn't human. Nearly her entire body is mechanical. In fact, many other characters deviate far more from human proportions. The discomfort some feel seems to stem from how close she looks to human, without fully crossing that line. It's a stylistic choice that will divide audiences, but it's far from a failure. From a technical standpoint, the CGI is outstanding. The visual effects are seamless and grounded, making Iron City feel like a fully realized, lived-in world rather than a collection of digital sets. The city feels dense, populated, and alive. Even the 3D presentation adds genuine depth and atmosphere, enhancing immersion rather than distracting from it. The action sequences are consistently strong and steadily improve as the film progresses. That said, the pacing is uneven. The movie attempts to incorporate nearly everything from the first 2 volumes of the source material, which results in a narrative that occasionally feels overstuffed. While the original manga is compelling, it wasn't necessarily structured for a single, large-scale Hollywood adaptation. As a result, the film ends on a note that clearly demands a sequel, offering little true closure on its own. In hindsight, adapting later storylines, such as the Tuned Agent arc, might have provided a more complete standalone experience. The film contains a fair amount of intense, graphic combat. While the violence is frequent and sometimes brutal, the fact that many characters are mechanical allows the film to maintain a PG-13 rating. Notably, some of the darkest and most disturbing elements from the manga are toned down or removed entirely, material that would have easily pushed the film into NC-17 territory. As a piece of speculative science fiction, this film is absolutely worth recommending. Alita, Battle Angel 2019 is a cyberpunk action story centered on identity, memory, and self-discovery, following a cyborg warrior searching for her purpose in a harsh, divided world. Like many others, I remember seeing the promotional material back in 2019 and skipping the film when it was released. It underperformed at the box office, and I was part of the audience that overlooked it. After finally watching it, I can confidently say that was a mistake. The film is far better than its reception suggested. There are many strengths here. Adaptations of Japanese properties don't always translate well to Western cinema, but this is a rare case where it truly works. The director's distinctive style brings energy and creativity to the screen, while the screenplay delivers characters with surprising emotional depth. You can clearly feel the influence of strong character-driven writing throughout. The cast is impressively stacked, with each actor bringing personality and presence to their roles. Salazar's performance, in particular, is elevated by exceptional motion capture work that rivals some of the best digital performances of the past decade. The visual design of the world is imaginative, detailed, and consistently engaging, making every frame feel intentional. In the end, this film stands as a bold, visually striking, and emotionally sincere sci-fi adventure that deserved far more attention than it received. The action is staged and directed with real confidence, easily ranking among the strongest action work Robert Rodriguez has ever delivered. What surprised me even more were the quieter, character-driven moments. There are scenes here that carry an emotional weight rarely seen in his filmography, and they genuinely stand out. The film ultimately closes on a clear sequel hook, and knowing that a follow-up is in development is exciting, because this world and these characters still have plenty of potential left to explore. Looking back, Alita, Battle Angel feels like one of the most overlooked films of the 2010s. It's unfortunate that it didn't receive stronger theatrical support, but that disappointment fades knowing the story isn't finished yet. That said, the film's biggest weakness lies in its structure. It's oddly assembled, overcrowded, uneven, and frequently awkward. The pacing is inconsistent, making the movie feel longer than it actually is. Just when it seems ready to conclude naturally, it rushes forward into an even clumsier finale that exists mainly to tease future installments. In doing so, it introduces and resolves a new plot element almost immediately, contradicting ideas presented moments earlier. This stuffed final act is frustrating, especially since many of these issues could have been smoothed out with cleaner editing and stronger narrative focus. The movie somehow manages to feel rushed and overextended at the same time. Another issue is that the film struggles to express a clear identity beyond its visuals. While there are character arcs, they're fairly basic and don't always evolve smoothly. Supporting characters often feel more active than the leads, popping in and out of the story without much narrative cohesion. Events don't always build on one another, and setups don't consistently earn their payoffs. Still, the performances are generally solid, and the presentation remains engaging enough to hold interest. Visually, however, the film shines. It simply looks fantastic. The fully digital lead character could have easily fallen into uncanny territory, yet she comes across as expressive, believable, and easy to root for. While the oversized eyes may seem unnecessary at first, they quickly fade into the background and stop being distracting. A few rotoscoped faces appear slightly off, but once you accept the film's visual language, it largely works. Because of this, the action sequences are effective and often the most enjoyable parts of the experience. Even the heavily CGI-driven set pieces maintain a sense of impact rather than feeling weightless. At times, it feels like the filmmakers became too absorbed in the spectacle, and the result is a final third that drags due to poor pacing. Still, the movie is never outright boring and remains intermittently entertaining throughout. It's undeniably messy and doesn't fully capitalize on its themes or world building, but as the first chapter of a larger story, it shows promise. While I'm not desperate for an immediate sequel, I'd definitely be curious to see where the narrative goes next. Coming into the film with fresh exposure to the original manga only heightened that curiosity. As someone new to the medium, discovering Yukito Kishiro's work first made it clear how much care was taken to visually honor the source material. Much like Rodriguez's approach with Sin City, the action here is framed with a strong sense of respect for its illustrated origins. Dynamic camera movements and stylized combat sequences feel lifted straight from the page, giving each of Alita's battles a fluid, graphic novel energy that often elevates the film beyond its narrative flaws. Pulling Alita's wide, expressive eyes out of the scrap heap that once swallowed her whole, Alita, Battle Angel arrives as the final major Fox release before the studio's Disney acquisition. Robert Rodriguez floods the screen with a gritty cyberpunk energy, seamlessly fusing sleek CGI with live-action performances and anime-inspired movement. The camera glides and whips across a decaying, post-apocalyptic world where Alita effortlessly dismantles cyborg gladiators, creating a visual rhythm that feels both kinetic and strangely elegant. This has been a passion project decades in the making, one James Cameron has reportedly wanted to bring to life since the mid-90s. The screenplay, penned by Cameron alongside Lita Calligrittis, works best when it leans heavily on Yukito Kishiro's manga as its backbone. That source material gives the film room to chart Alita's transformation from discarded scrap into a relentless, battle-hardened warrior, an arc that fits comfortably within Cameron's long-standing fascination with resilient, self-discovering heroes. Along the way, the movie injects bursts of delightfully odd cyberpunk flavor, from grotesque killer machines to unsettling body modifications that hint at a far stranger world beneath the surface. Where the film stumbles is in its expanded romantic subplot. Alita's relationship with Hugo feels like an attempt to echo Cameron's own history with tragic, star-crossed lovers, but here the emotional impact never quite lands. Part of this comes down to a lack of chemistry and an underwhelming performance from Keean Johnson, and part of it stems from how much runtime the romance consumes, time that might have been better spent exploring the more bizarre and imaginative aspects of Alita's world and combat encounters. Rosa Salazar, however, is consistently compelling. Through motion capture, she gives Alita a surprising warmth and vulnerability, using those oversized manga eyes to convey curiosity, innocence, and growing self-awareness. At the same time, she convincingly sells Alita's brutal efficiency in battle, balancing tenderness and ferocity as the so-called Battle Angel fully awakens. It's a performance that grounds the film emotionally, even when the surrounding narrative struggles. In many ways, the movie recalls artificial intelligence, thematically, visually, and even structurally. Alita is leaner, louder, and far more action-driven, which makes it easier to digest, but AI ultimately feels richer and more layered, its apparent flaws transforming into strengths over time. There's also an interesting parallel behind the scenes. Just as Spielberg stepped in to realize Kubrick's vision, Rodriguez takes the reins of a project long associated with Cameron, who seems content for now to remain immersed in his endlessly successful blue-skinned universe. It's also refreshing to see Rodriguez working with a genuinely massive budget. The film looks expensive, and importantly, it looks like the money actually made it onto the screen. The visuals are polished, the effects are largely convincing, and the action is staged with clarity. When so many modern blockbusters with absurd budgets still manage to look flat or unfinished, that alone deserves recognition. That said, even with its strengths, Alita, Battle Angel never fully clicked for me. While I understand and appreciate the push toward adapting fresh properties instead of endlessly recycling familiar franchises, I found myself emotionally distant. The premise, a damaged cyborg with a human brain rebuilt by the compassionate Dr. Dyson Ito, slowly uncovering her forgotten past and her connection to the floating city of the elite, has all the ingredients for something truly special. Yet despite its technical accomplishments and occasional flashes of brilliance, the film never quite transcends its parts. In the end, Alita stands as a visually impressive, often entertaining, but ultimately uneven experience, one that hints at a richer, stranger cyberpunk story just beyond its grasp. There's only one path to rise above the scrapyard world and reach the floating city above, becoming the ultimate champion of the brutal sport that dominates this society's entertainment, motorball. Let's start with what works. Visually, the film is undeniably impressive. Weta Digital, after years of uneven output following their legendary work on The Lord of the Rings, seems to have found its rhythm again. Following Mortal Engines, Alita continues that resurgence. The character design, action sequences, and especially the combat scenes are polished, energetic, and easy to follow. The fights are well staged, fluid, and visually coherent, never confusing, which is no small achievement in CGI-heavy action films. Unfortunately, that's where most of the praise ends. The post-apocalyptic setting feels overly familiar, borrowing heavily from ideas that science fiction has explored countless times, and often more effectively. The real disappointment, however, lies in the characters. While they check all the expected boxes, they feel recycled and emotionally distant. There's little chemistry between them, and none of the relationships truly give you a reason to care. Even talented performers like Mahershala Ali, Jennifer Connelly, and Christoph Waltz struggle to bring depth to characters written with minimal warmth or personality. The most damaging flaw is the central romance. Since much of the story and its conclusion depend on this relationship, its lack of emotional spark weakens the entire film. Instead of feeling earned, the connection feels rushed and shallow. There's also the film's surprising level of violence. For its rating, it pushes the limits. Characters are torn apart, decapitated, and dismembered. Yes, they're mostly robotic bodies and there's no blood, but the intensity is hard to ignore. It was easily one of the most violent films I've seen aimed at a younger audience, and judging by post-screening conversations, many parents felt the same unease. No amount of visual spectacle can fully distract from how predictable the story becomes. What starts with potential slowly drifts into repetition. And honestly, motorball itself feels like yet another over-the-top futuristic sport that makes you question why anyone thought it was a good idea in the first place. The story follows Alita, discovered in a scrapyard and rebuilt with no memory of her past. As she searches for her identity and purpose, she relies on her new guardian and a potential love interest. There are heroes and villains, but no clear moral extremes, just shades of gray. However, the film ends without offering real closure. It feels less like a complete story and more like a season finale that assumes another chapter will follow. Nothing is truly resolved. There's also an oddly unfinished quality to the narrative, as if the film expects a sequel to do the heavy lifting. Watching it is similar to investing in a TV series that suddenly stops mid-arc. And once again, Hollywood leans heavily on CGI and large-scale destruction instead of trusting storytelling. Alita, Battle Angel isn't built on a bad idea, but it never fully delivers on its promise. By the time the credits roll, there are more unanswered questions than satisfying moments. The plot becomes increasingly formulaic, eventually defaulting to the tired sci-fi trope of a deadly futuristic competition. As the CGI ramps up, realism fades away, and the film begins to resemble a high-budget video game cutscene rather than a grounded narrative. Add in the predictable teenage love story, which feels more like instant attraction than genuine emotional connection, and the experience becomes even less engaging. In the end, Alita isn't terrible, but it's far from memorable. Strong visuals can only go so far when the story underneath feels thin, familiar, and emotionally hollow. I honestly struggled to connect with the film's idea of romance. The supposed love between Alita and Hugo never truly clicked for me. There was little emotional spark to justify it. And the concept itself felt strange. What would realistically draw a human toward an android in this way? It felt more awkward than touching. Then there's Vector, who comes off as a thinly veiled Blade-style knockoff. Even by the end, his character arc remains confusing. He suddenly changes, his eyes glow blue, and we're expected to accept it without proper explanation. Many critics applauded Rosa Salazar's performance as Alita, and to be fair, it was an extremely demanding role. She did put in a strong effort. Still, the heavy reliance on CGI often pulled me out of the experience, making it harder to fully believe in the character as a living, breathing presence. The same problem extends to Christoph Waltz's Dr. Ito. Waltz is a phenomenal actor, but the way his character is written here feels inconsistent, making his emotional beats less convincing. Jennifer Connelly's Chiron suffers a similar fate, interesting in theory but underdeveloped in execution. A major frustration is the film's obsession with Salem. Characters endlessly talk about it, dream of it, and obsess over reaching it, yet we never actually see it. Not even a glimpse. When Alita herself is supposedly from Salem, this omission feels especially hollow. All that buildup leads to nothing but vague mystique, which quickly becomes tiresome. Add to that the recycled superhero stances and dramatic poses, and the film occasionally slips into self-parody. And yes, the ending clearly exists to set up a sequel, which only highlights how much the story feels unfinished. If there is a sequel, I genuinely hope it finally explains what Salem actually is and why it matters. That said, credit must be given where it's due. Visually, the film is often impressive. Not necessarily in the bombastic, CGI-saturated set pieces, but in the android designs themselves, which look surprisingly tactile and believable. Against expectations, Alita. Battle Angel works largely because the screenplay focuses on establishing its core narrative before layering in cyberpunk aesthetics. Alita herself is a genuinely engaging protagonist, and her journey of self-discovery is compelling from start to finish. That character-driven focus gives the film a solid foundation, even when everything branching off from it feels messy. Director Robert Rodriguez may not possess the same cinematic finesse as James Cameron, but his vision still comes together more effectively than many similar sci-fi attempts. The world building is dense and detailed, yet oddly, the dystopian setting never becomes as intriguing as Alita herself. The emotional high points belong almost entirely to the scenes shared between Alita and Dr. Ito, the only relationship that feels fully realized. Most other characters fade into the background, sketched thinly and quickly forgotten. Yes, the dialogue can be corny, and yes, the action often borders on absurd, but the film leans into that excess so confidently that it becomes fun. The over-the-top combat is energetic, unapologetic, and ultimately entertaining, firmly establishing Alita as a formidable cyborg warrior. Despite the overwhelming use of CGI, it rarely overshadows the emotional core of the story. What makes the experience so conflicted is that the film constantly hints at greatness without fully committing to it. The script clearly needed more refinement, and the lack of a proper ending doesn't help its case. Still, even with all its flaws, this cyberpunk sci-fi action film surprised me. Watching it was enjoyable, occasionally frustrating, but never boring. Beneath the spectacle lies a surprisingly strong emotional undercurrent, and Rosa Salazar's performance alone makes Alita's arc easy to invest in. The film is far from perfect, but it's also far from empty-headed. It's worth giving a chance. You might end up more impressed than expected, and really, this highlights a larger issue with modern cinema. Films today rarely stand on their own. They're often designed as the first chapter in a sprawling franchise or shared universe. Outside of juggernauts like Marvel or established properties such as Star Wars, most new franchises stumble right out of the gate. Too many prioritize future setup over telling a complete, satisfying story in the present. The ill-fated Dark Universe launch with Tom Cruise comes to mind, Alita. Battle Angel feels caught in that same trap, ambitious, promising, but ultimately unfinished. I'm not going to pretend that the creators of Alita, Battle Angel wouldn't love to see this turn into a long-running franchise, complete with sequels, spin-offs, and maybe even a television series someday. That said, the film works surprisingly well as a standalone story. Even if no sequel ever arrives, it still feels complete rather than like a half-told introduction that goes nowhere. The story takes place far into the future, after a devastating global conflict known as the Fall. What remains of humanity is divided in a harsh and familiar way. The less fortunate survive in a sprawling scrapyard city on Earth, while the elite live above them in a floating metropolis, untouched and unreachable. This imbalance is the foundation of the world, and it remains unchallenged until one discovery changes everything. Dr. Dyson Ito, a skilled cyberphysician who rebuilds cyborgs from discarded parts, stumbles upon the remains of a young female cyborg in the junkyard. He restores her and gives her a name, Alita. As expected, she has no memory of her past, and as the story unfolds, it becomes clear that her forgotten identity is deeply connected to the fate of both cities and the unseen power that controls them from above. At its core, this is a classic chosen one or savior-style narrative. There's nothing groundbreaking about that concept, but when executed with care, it can still be incredibly engaging, and Alita, Battle Angel proves that point. The film leans into emotion, spectacle, and character growth rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. Rosa Salazar delivers a strong and genuinely charming performance as Alita. Despite not being a household name, she carries the film with confidence and warmth, making Alita easy to root for. Her chemistry with Christoph Waltz, who plays Dr. Ito, is easily the emotional heart of the movie. Waltz brings his usual depth and sincerity, and their father-daughter-like bond gives the story real weight. Alita's romantic interest, Hugo, is competently played, though the role itself feels somewhat interchangeable. There's nothing wrong with the performance, but it lacks the same memorability as the film's central relationship. Jennifer Connelly appears in a supporting role, though she feels underused and could have contributed much more. Even longtime fans may be surprised to learn that Jackie Earle Haley appears in the film. His role is so buried under effects that it's easy to miss entirely. The film is directed with style and energy, favoring fast-paced action and fluid camera work that suits its heavy use of visual effects. Despite James Cameron's involvement behind the scenes, the movie feels very much shaped by Robert Rodriguez's sensibilities. The action sequences are sharp, kinetic, and visually clean, and the CGI blends more smoothly with live-action elements than in many effects-heavy films. In fact, the digital work here often feels more natural and grounded than in earlier CGI-driven blockbusters. The soundtrack does its job, but doesn't leave a lasting impression. It supports the scenes without distracting from them, though it's unlikely anyone will walk out of the theater humming the score. Still, that's a minor issue in the grand scheme of things. Ultimately, if you're looking for stylish action, emotional character moments, and a richly built sci-fi world, Alita, Battle Angel is well worth your time, provided you don't mind its 2-hour runtime. After the first few scenes, you'll stop noticing Alita's oversized CGI eyes and start focusing on her journey, her growth, and her determination. And yes, her weapon of choice may remind some viewers of a certain famous fantasy sword. While critical reactions were mixed, audience reception tells a different story. Fans connected with Alita's world and her struggle, and that enthusiasm is hard to ignore. By the end, it's difficult not to hope for another chapter, because this is a universe that feels like it still has plenty of stories left to tell. The film clearly wears its influences on its sleeve, drawing inspiration from classics like Blade Runner, RoboCop, Rollerball, and Metropolis. The story begins when Dr. Ito uncovers the discarded head and spinal core of a female cyborg in a scrapyard. He rebuilds her using the mechanical body once designed for his disabled daughter. The result is Alita, a kind-hearted, wide-eyed teenage girl who slowly transforms into a formidable and deadly fighter. As Alita begins navigating her new existence, she crosses paths with a range of characters, including Ito's former partner Keean, the mysterious power broker Vector, the brutal Zappen, and the street-smart dreamer Hugo. Despite moments of darkness and occasional macabre imagery, the film maintains a youthful tone. Its 12A rating reflects a world filled with stylized, cartoon-like violence, where shattered metal and sparking circuitry replace blood and gore, giving the film an oddly innocent edge despite its intensity. Some performances feel underutilized. Mahershala Ali brings undeniable presence to Vector, yet the role never fully taps into his charisma. Christoph Waltz, on the other hand, delivers a reliably strong performance, bringing warmth and authority to a character who serves as Alita's mentor, protector, and moral compass. Supporting roles add texture, though not all leave a lasting impression. Visually, Alita, Battle Angel is built for the biggest screen possible. It's an IMAX-friendly spectacle packed with eye-catching effects, though its appeal may skew toward younger audiences, something closer to late-night sleepover entertainment than a deeply challenging sci-fi experience. Compared to heavier genre entries like Ghost in the Shell, the film avoids complex philosophical themes, opting instead for a straightforward dystopian romance that feels safe and familiar. The direction reflects Robert Rodriguez's unique career path. Known for working outside the studio system on inventive, low-budget projects, Rodriguez proves he can still deliver a polished blockbuster when needed. His love for exaggerated action and visual flair gives the film an earnest sense of energy, making it feel like a genuine attempt to offer something fresh within a crowded genre. While it never reaches the emotional or thematic depth of Yukito Kishiro's original manga, it stands as a respectful and ambitious adaptation. Some of the quieter, more reflective moments that gave the source material greater emotional weight are missing, which slightly dulls the impact of the film's most dramatic sequences. Still, what does make it into the final cut is undeniably cool, fast-paced, and visually inventive. The bond between Alita and Ito remains one of the film's strongest elements, reinforcing Rodriguez's ability to craft an enjoyable, audience-friendly studio film. A long-cherished passion project for producer James Cameron, the film eventually landed in Rodriguez's hands as Cameron shifted focus to his expanding Avatar universe. With a reported budget hovering around $200 million, Alita, Battle Angel stands as one of the year's boldest blockbuster gambles. While it doesn't fully succeed in every area and could benefit from tighter refinement, it largely delivers as a big-screen, popcorn-fueled ride that ranks among the most visually impressive spectacles of its kind. Set centuries in the future, where the line between human and machine has all but vanished, the film offers a feast of futuristic imagery. The combined efforts of Cameron and Rodriguez's production teams push visual technology to its limits, bringing Iron City to life and making Alita herself feel astonishingly real. Alita as a character is the film's greatest success. Thanks to Rosa Salazar's expressive motion capture performance, she feels fully alive, imbued with emotion, curiosity, and strength. Any early skepticism surrounding her digital design quickly disappears, as the filmmakers convincingly establish her as the heart of the story. Whenever Alita takes center stage, the film becomes thrilling and emotionally engaging. Unfortunately, many of the elements around her struggle to keep up. World building and exposition are not Rodriguez's strongest skills, and the film often rushes through critical background details. References to past wars, floating cities, and larger conflicts are mentioned but rarely explored, leaving the world feeling less rich than it could have been. Supporting characters suffer as well, ranging from thinly sketched to oddly distracting. Some cameos feel misplaced, and certain costume and character choices verge on unintentionally cartoonish. Combined with occasional clunky dialogue, these issues prevent the film from reaching its full potential. One can't help but wonder if a stronger narrative hand might have balanced the stunning visuals with deeper emotional resonance. That said, not even a more experienced storyteller could have salvaged a few of the more grating performances. While the ambition is undeniable, Alita, Battle Angel ultimately remains a visually spectacular experience anchored by a remarkable central character, imperfect, but far from forgettable. Despite being positioned as an ensemble piece, Alita, Battle Angel oddly gives a disproportionate amount of focus to Keean Johnson's Hugo, Alita's fast-bonding love interest and scrap runner. Unfortunately, many of the supporting performances feel underutilized or oddly restrained. Christoph Waltz, usually magnetic, comes across as surprisingly stiff as Dr. Dyson Ito, Alita's protector and father figure. Jennifer Connelly's Chiron is given very little narrative room to breathe, while Mahershala Ali's Vector and Jackie Earle, Haley's heavily CGI-masked antagonist, never quite leave a lasting impression as villains. Another issue that may frustrate viewers is the film's structure. Even with a runtime exceeding 2 hours, the story often feels like it's holding back its biggest emotional and narrative rewards for potential sequels. That hesitation dulls the impact of the ending, which lands without the payoff one expects after such an expansive setup. While the world of Alita feels rich and full of promise, the film ends before fully delivering on its potential. That said, from a technical standpoint, Alita, Battle Angel is undeniably impressive. Visually, it's a stunning cyberpunk spectacle and one of the stronger manga-to-live-action adaptations in recent years. James Cameron, who co-wrote the script alongside Lita Kalogridis and nurtured the project for over a decade, clearly poured ambition into the film. Director Robert Rodriguez successfully translates that vision onto the screen with flair and energy. Set in a distant future following a devastating global war, the story unfolds in a world divided between the wealthy sky city of Salem and the struggling Iron City below. When a discarded cyborg is discovered in a scrapyard by Dr. Ito, she is rebuilt and named Alita. As she awakens, Alita gradually realizes she possesses extraordinary combat abilities tied to a forgotten past, one that traces back to her role as an elite warrior during the war. Her growing strength and independence draw the attention of Vector, a powerful figure operating from Zalem, who attempts to eliminate her by unleashing a wave of deadly cyborg adversaries. Along the way, Alita forms a bond with Hugo, who introduces her to motorball, a brutal, high-speed gladiatorial sport. The motorball sequences stand out as some of the film's most thrilling moments, delivering intense action that feels both cinematic and stylized, almost like a polished video game cutscene brought to life. The fight choreography is slick and dynamic, and while Alita's CGI design may appear slightly exaggerated at times, Rosa Salazar's motion capture performance gives the character warmth, emotion, and charm. The grimy, industrial look of Iron City, filled with augmented citizens, bounty hunters, and towering machines, adds texture and atmosphere to the setting. The motorball arena itself is a visual highlight, delivering an exhilarating and memorable climax. Performance-wise, Rosa Salazar shines as Alita, carrying the emotional weight of the film with sincerity and energy. Christoph Waltz provides a steady presence as Dr. Ito, while Jennifer Connelly and Mahershala Ali make the most of their limited screen time. Ed Skrein delivers a solid turn as a dangerous hunter-warrior, and Keean Johnson fits well as Alita's conflicted romantic interest. In the end, Alita, Battle Angel is a visually striking and action-packed sci-fi adventure. While its storytelling and character development don't always match its spectacular presentation, the film succeeds in creating a compelling heroine and an intriguing world that begs for deeper exploration. For fans of futuristic action and cyberpunk aesthetics, it's absolutely worth experiencing on the big screen. Going in, expectations were cautious, especially considering the mixed history of live-action manga adaptations. While James Cameron's recent projects haven't quite reached the heights of his earlier action classics, Alita, Battle Angel proves he still knows how to craft an ambitious cinematic experience. It may not be perfect, but it's bold, energetic, and undeniably entertaining. Even so, being a science fiction fan, I was always going to give this film a chance. One of the first things that immediately stands out is just how heavily it relies on CGI. At times, the visuals are so dominant that it almost feels less like a traditional live-action movie and more like a polished, big-budget manga brought to life. That alone isn't necessarily a bad thing. Modern CGI is incredibly powerful, but the effect is used so openly and frequently that it becomes hard to ignore. Whether this was a deliberate stylistic choice or simply an overindulgence is up for debate, but there are moments where it starts to feel slightly excessive. It had been a long time since I last saw the original manga adaptation, and I was surprised to learn that it itself was drawn from an even earlier series of manga, and that the original director treated it almost as a side project. While watching, I did experience a few familiar flashes from the earlier version, and from what I've since read, the film stays fairly loyal to its source, aside from some noticeable westernization of certain characters, especially Dr. Ito. The story follows Dr. Ito, who searches through a massive scrapyard for usable parts and unexpectedly discovers the remains of a girl who is still alive. He takes her home and gives her a new mechanical body, a natural fit in a world where most people are at least partly cyborg. The setting, known as Iron City, sits beneath a mysterious floating metropolis that discards its waste onto the city below. As a cybertechnologist, Ito specializes in repairing and constructing cybernetic bodies, making him perfectly suited to bring Alita back from the brink. Much of the film centers on Alita's attempt to uncover who she truly is, as she has no memory of her past. Gradually, it becomes clear that she was once a highly advanced combat soldier. This revelation naturally draws attention from dangerous figures lurking in the shadows, including one who clearly operates at a much higher level of power. At one point, I even found myself wondering just how long the film was going to run, especially considering James Cameron's reputation for lengthy epics. That's why the ending felt a bit abrupt. The story wraps up suddenly, leaving several threads unresolved. While this is partly explained by the fact that the film adapts only the first 2 volumes of the source material, it still feels as though the narrative stops just as it's building real momentum. There are hints that sequels may eventually follow, though it's difficult to predict how they'll expand the story, as it seemed like there was perhaps only another short stretch of plot left when the credits rolled. Then again, without having read the full series, it's hard to judge how much more there is to explore. In many ways, the film shares familiar ground with other dystopian, youth-focused sci-fi stories, yet it manages to stand apart from franchises like The Hunger Games, Divergent, and The Maze Runner. It comes closest in tone to Ready Player One, with shades of Elysium mixed in, though thankfully executed far more effectively. From the outset, Alita's uniqueness is emphasized, particularly through her large, expressive CGIs. While I wasn't convinced this was strictly necessary, Rosa Salazar delivers a strong performance that would have carried the character regardless. It clearly serves as a visual homage to the anime roots of the story. What impressed me most about the film's visual design was its gritty, reimagined version of a ruined Kansas City. It actually made me glad this adaptation wasn't attempted years earlier, as the technology simply wouldn't have been able to support its ambitious style. Older sci-fi classics like Blade Runner and Total Recall have a charm that comes from their era, but this story truly benefits from modern visual effects. The cast overall is solid, with several recognizable names appearing in smaller roles, adding a bit of extra weight and familiarity to the world without overshadowing the main story. Even though the role itself leaned heavily into familiar tropes, Ed Skrein delivered what I'd easily call his strongest performance yet as Zappin. As for Christoph Waltz, his presence barely needs commentary. His reputation speaks for itself. Taken as a whole, the film succeeds as an entertaining spectacle, driven by energetic action and an engaging narrative. What truly stings is the apparent abandonment of its planned continuation. This story felt tailor-made for expansion, almost begging to grow into a long-form series, with this installment acting as a solid foundation. The world and its characters still had plenty of unexplored territory left. While I don't personally come from a background steeped in manga, comics, or young adult fiction, it's impossible not to recognize the pattern this film belongs to. Over the last decade, cinema has been flooded with teen-focused sci-fi dystopias: The Hunger Games, Divergent, The Maze Runner, Ender's Game, and now Alita. Battle Angel. Despite their glossy effects, big budgets, and impressive casts, many of these films blur together in tone and substance. It's especially disappointing when such talented performers are relegated to underused supporting roles, their skills buried beneath layers of CGI and formula. These stories often feel trapped in a narrow emotional range, revolving around adolescent crushes, competitions, and exams dressed up as world-ending conflicts. At their core, they resemble exaggerated school anxiety dreams, where the confusion of entering adulthood is simplified into rigid class systems and symbolic oppression. Social and political ideas are present, but usually flattened to the point of cliché, sometimes literally, as seen in the visual metaphor of elites living physically above the working class. The romantic elements, too, strain credibility. Despite being a centuries-old cyborg with an ambiguous biological identity, the protagonist is still written into a conventional teen love arc with a rebellious human boy. Meanwhile, the audience is expected to marvel at the spectacle, even as the story mirrors other franchises by depicting televised violence as entertainment designed to pacify the masses. Whether this is meant as sharp satire or unconscious irony is unclear. I may have encountered this film at the wrong moment. Having recently revisited Lewis Carroll's Alice books, the contrast was striking. Carroll's work doesn't condescend to its audience, young or old. His stories explore the anxieties of growing up through clever absurdity and layered meaning, rewarding readers at every stage of life. By comparison, many modern dystopian films feel content to recycle familiar beats without offering much intellectual depth. That said, Alita does include one intriguing moment that stands out from its otherwise relentless visual excess. In a scene where Alita enters a bar called Kansas, accompanied by a small dog and later joined by three men who help her, the reference to the Wizard of Oz is unmistakable. Interestingly, Baum's story itself was a simplified American echo of Alice, and that lineage of repetition feels symbolic of the franchise-heavy era we're now stuck in. Originality is increasingly replaced by echoes of echoes. While I hope future franchise entries, from Avatar to the Terminator, manage to rise above this cycle, I remain skeptical. Still, one undeniable achievement of this film lies in its technical ambition. The digital performance of its lead pushes cinema closer to fully bridging the gap between animated and live-action characters. As with Avatar, it hints at a future where the line between human actors and digital creations becomes increasingly blurred, perhaps uncomfortably so. This polished yet highly familiar sci-fi spectacle draws heavily from a long lineage of genre classics, blending borrowed ideas into an emotionally engaging and intellectually stimulating package. While much of what appears on screen feels inspired, sometimes overtly, by earlier films, the movie succeeds in manipulating core human emotions and curiosities in a way that remains entertaining and accessible. The film feels like a carefully assembled mosaic of influences, echoes of mechanical law enforcers and war machines, desolate junkyard worlds, enhanced super assassins, hive-mind antagonists, sprawling futuristic cities, and stark divisions between social classes. These references are woven together to appeal to the audience's instinctive emotional triggers, often relying on clear moral contrasts and familiar dramatic beats. One of the most obvious motifs is the repeated emphasis on artificial limbs and cybernetic bodies, which dominate the visual landscape almost to excess. Despite its lack of originality, the movie manages an interesting contradiction. While it leans heavily into crowd-pleasing melodrama rather than subtle, award-chasing depth, it maintains strong pacing and narrative momentum. The story keeps viewers invested, delivering a competent and sometimes impressive fusion of borrowed elements that never fully collapses under its own weight. Although the film is directed by Robert Rodriguez, the creative fingerprints of James Cameron, who co-wrote and produced the project, are unmistakable. This is especially evident in the slightly animated aesthetic applied to the central character, which gives her an otherworldly yet emotionally expressive presence. Rodriguez shines most during the action-heavy moments, particularly the combat sequences and the visually kinetic motorball scenes, a violent sport reminiscent of classic dystopian competitions, reimagined here with cybernetic athletes. The story centers on a young cyborg whose brain and core are discovered in a scrapyard by Dr. Ito, a compassionate cybersurgeon serving the struggling residents of Iron City. Looming above this industrial sprawl is Salem, a pristine floating city reserved exclusively for the elite, its gates closed to all except those born there or the occasional motorball champion. The divide between these two worlds defines much of the film's thematic backbone. As Alita receives a new body and begins her new life, Ito's protectiveness hints at a hidden past, while the city itself proves dangerously lawless. Criminal gangs harvest body parts from victims, and even cyborgs are not spared from dismemberment. Through her clashes with these threats, Alita gradually regains memories of her former life as a powerful warrior from a long-forgotten interplanetary war, along with the combat skills that once made her formidable. The romantic subplot, involving her relationship with Hugo, a well-meaning hustler surrounded by questionable friends, introduces a slightly juvenile tone that at times undercuts the film's darker ambitions. Still, the movie delivers a memorable lineup of cyborg villains and bounty hunters, ranging from street punk enforcers to towering monstrosities. Complicating matters further is a shadowy conspiracy connecting the brutal sport of motorball, black market organ trafficking, and the elusive promise of access to Salem. Although the film isn't adapted from a young adult novel, it undeniably carries the spirit of the genre. A young protagonist discovering her identity, an oppressive system controlled by distant elites, a band of allies, and romance interwoven with rebellion. Like many modern Y-style sci-fi stories, it occasionally stumbles into convoluted plotting and cheesy dialogue. However, it also reaches higher than many of its peers, offering impressive world building, stylish action, striking visual effects, and a surprisingly compassionate lead character. Adapted from a beloved manga, the film presents a futuristic tale of rebirth and resistance, following a cyborg heroine who uses both her combat abilities and her empathy to challenge an unjust social order. Visually and thematically, it often feels like an anime brought to life, complete with exaggerated features and heightened emotion, while delivering a familiar but effective blend of high science fiction and aspirational fantasy. Though its themes may seem well-worn, they remain enduring. The vast gap between the powerful and the powerless, and the harsh reality that climbing beyond one's assigned place in society almost always demands sacrifice. Overall, Alita is simply incredible, both as a film and as a character. The movie delivers pure cinematic energy, and much of that comes from how confidently the action is staged. Robert Rodriguez clearly understands combat choreography, allowing the camera to linger just long enough so every fast, colorful movement lands with impact. The technology used to bring Alita to life is nothing short of impressive, making her not just a fierce warrior, but also expressive, charming, and emotionally believable. After a while, you genuinely forget she's a digital creation, because her facial expressions and body language blend seamlessly with the live-action cast. This film feels like a rush of dystopian adrenaline that truly deserves to be experienced on the big screen. The level of detail throughout is astonishing, and the story remains engaging from start to finish. It's honestly surprising how some films reach massive box office milestones, while a boundary-pushing movie like this struggles to earn even half as much. Weak marketing may have played a role, and some longtime fans of the source material weren't fully satisfied, but watching it without prior knowledge of the manga made the experience even more immersive. From beginning to end, it was impossible to look away. There's been plenty of discussion about how this project was a passion endeavor for James Cameron, who secured the rights many years ago. Some believe the film might have turned out differently under his direct direction, but with his focus shifting to the Avatar series, that version never came to be. Still, what we got stands firmly on its own, and it leaves a strong desire for a sequel, especially with the promise of Alita eventually confronting the mysterious and sinister Nova. Set in the year 2563, the film takes place centuries after Earth is left in ruins by a catastrophic interplanetary conflict known as the Great War. In the scrapyard beneath the floating city of Salem, scientist Dr. Dyson Edo discovers the remains of a female cyborg, remarkably preserved with a living human brain. He gives her a new body and names her Alita, in memory of his late daughter. Awakening without any recollection of her past, Alita begins navigating life in Iron City, meeting figures like Dr. Keean, Edo's estranged ex-wife, and Hugo, a street-smart dreamer obsessed with reaching the city in the sky. Hugo introduces Alita to motorball, a violent high-speed sport where cyborg gladiators clash for fame and fortune. Unknown to her at first, Hugo secretly steals cyborg parts for Vector, the powerful figure who controls motorball and effectively governs Iron City. One night, Alita follows Edo and witnesses his secret life as a hunter-warrior when they're ambushed by a group of deadly cyborg killers led by Gruishka.